Carrie, this week sucked.
No kidding.
Welcome to Good News, Bad News, the Libertarian Christian Roundtable, where every other week we challenge the status quo and give you the libertarian Christian analysis of what's happening in your world.
Welcome to another episode of Good News, Bad News, the Libertarian Christian Roundtable. This is a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute. I am your host, Dr. Norman Horn, and I'm joined tonight with the lovely and eminent Carrie Baldwin and the awesome and incredible Matthew Bellis. Guys, welcome to the show once again for this insane week that we have had, and we are recapping with a couple of not so happy things, but we will try to make it through with as much anger plus levity as possible. How about that? Can we survive on that one?
People always ask us to think about the children, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah. So this is an episode about kids on some level. And so we are going to review, first of all, the tragedy that occurred yesterday. So this is Wednesday, the 25th. And yesterday there was a pretty substantial shooting that occurred in Uvalde, Texas, where at an elementary school, an 18-year-old managed to make his way into a school under some weird pretenses, it seems, that are only now coming out. And the death count just has seemingly gone up. At first, it was under 15. Then it became 17. Now it looks like it's 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
21.
And
man, oh, man.
And beyond the obviousness of the problem that this is a tragic occurrence. And, my parents live north of Uvalde. And
it is Uvalde. I've not been able to understand how to pronounce that name.
Uvalde. No, it's Uvalde, Texas.
Uvalde,
and it's if it, look it up on Google Maps. It's, about 80, 90 miles to the south and west, kind of west southwest of San Antonio. It's pretty close to the Mexican border. It's a bit of a hike after that, but it's an area I know pretty well. I've spent major elements of my life around the north of that area in the Frio River Valley and whatnot. So I kind of know the area pretty well. And of course, Aaron, who's not here tonight, who normally is with us, is down even farther south there in Monterey. And so, these are areas of which we are familiar. And so it is, it has some measure of connectivity to us, but yet it's still far away. And besides the fact that this is indeed a tragedy, I think what's, of course, compounding to the tragedy is the politicization that is immediately surrounding this. And it's just baffling to me to see what's going on. And I think that it triggers people in a lot of different ways. When you guys heard about it, what was the stuff that kind of came to your minds? I mean, I've kind of already, like I said, the first thing that came to me is like, doggone it, that's like 20 miles from my parents. I mean, that's, and 20 miles in Texas is nothing, so it's like, whoa, holy cow.
Yeah.
Right. I have to say that when I first heard about it, my immediate reaction was, oh crap, here comes the gun control debate again.
Yeah. Again.
And it's so frustrating because on the one hand, like I see people on Facebook and Twitter saying, hey, let's not politicize this. Let's mourn these deaths and not just jump straight into it. And then on the other hand, I see them jumping straight into it.
Oh yeah.
It's like, we have to do something about this.
Well, then that's the phrase, right? We have to do something, as though you somehow have the power to go into other people's minds and prevent them from doing stuff or whatnot.
Well, and one thing that is being brought up is mental health.
Yeah.
And, I think that mental health is a valid concern.
Oh, sure.
But I don't think that red flag laws, which are,
that's one proposition that's already
that's one proposition that's been thrown out there is red flag laws. And for those of you listening who don't quite understand the connection, a red flag law allows the police to determine if somebody is mentally stable enough to have a firearm, and so they can actually bypass due process if they think that somebody isn't mentally stable. And there's already a cloud of confusion over what constitutes mental instability.
Yeah.
And now we want the police, who don't execute their job very well as it is. Now we want them to be diagnosing people on the spot for mental instability. It's,
it's one thing to say, clearly somebody is out of control.
Right.
I mean, if you have it's not like you have to, watch somebody going, going crazy in front of you to go like, yep, that guy's unstable. But it's the point of the red flag law goes well beyond that.
Right.
Police are already empowered to deal with gunmen. So that's the activity is not the issue in that case. It's something else.
Right.
And so they're asking them to become like pseudo psychologists as well.
Right.
And quasi therapists is at the same time. Okay. Hang on there,
Well, and why aren't we asking,
yeah. Easy to catch.
But I mean, why aren't we asking the question, why are so many public school students struggling with mental instability? Like, why aren't we asking that question?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a common factor in a lot of these shootings. And I hate to say it, but actually I don't hate to say it. Yeah. I really think that the cause it can be tied down to the public schools themselves.
Yeah, it often is.
They put kids under immense amount of stress. The teachers are, themselves can be very toxic, and mistreat the kids. They put great pressure on the parents. The parents become toxic. I mean, it's the whole system is a freaking nightmare, and nobody's willing to look at it. It's like, what are we going to do?
Because it's attacking the sacred cow at that point.
Right. Yeah. But they want us to, they want the collective we to do something about it, but they're not willing to ask the question, why are our kids going insane? They're not asking that question.
And you use the word, the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's apropos to kind of point out a few things here. One is that the system is, if we want to define that as sort of the series of institutions that exist around us, and things like schools and, especially we're going to say the government institutions around us. That's the system that they're trying to kind of talk about at that point. And they act like oftentimes that in order to fix the system, we need like some sort of, maybe some small fix here, or we need this little overhaul. Like it's the red flag law, or we need to ban AR-15s, or we need to have more background checks, or we need to have, this, that, and the other. Like that little piece needs to get, tweaked. Here's the thing. This is like trying to patch Windows 95.
Yeah.
Like your problem is not that you need a patch for Windows 95. It's that you need to upgrade your OS to like something in the order of, maybe Windows 10 or something.
Right.
That's not.
Welcome to the Libertarian Christian Podcast, where we use the nerdiest way to explain something.
Well, it goes with our audience, right?
Yeah.
No, but I think people understand. Like, all right, we want to use another operating system analogy, and I actually think like Max Borders has done some pretty good kind of analogies on operating systems for societies in this regard, and so check him out if you want to learn kind of more like maybe deeper on that analogy. But I think it's at least apropos here to kind of point out that like what they're all calling for is not really addressing roots of the problem.
It's not,
because
Right.
I mean, because we should be asked the other questions you can ask, like why is it that schools are like, why are people not shooting up things like, office buildings? Why doesn't this happen at even more populated areas like, football games or basketball games or basically like sports events, major events? Why does that not happen?
Yeah.
I can tell you why that is because when you try to bring, somebody like that, a gunman into these situations where there are a whole lot of adults, then their risk profile goes up considerably. And so they don't see that as being a win-win. Like, you can just, like, this is not hard to understand. They go after the schools because they're vulnerable.
Well, and you touched on it real quick where you said that the schools are a little bit of a sacred cow.
Oh, yeah.
Where nobody wants to look at that as a potential problem. But I was talking about it with my wife today that, you know, everybody sends their kids to one building.
Yeah.
And we put a big sign on it that says gun-free zone. I mean, could you ask for a more perfect target?
Well, I mean, but like, I'm not even sure like that's we have to go there to kind of even make that point. Well, just look at, like, just ask the question, why does this not happen anywhere else? Like, technically, you're not going to you don't ever see people bringing in guns to baseball games. Like, that's not permitted. You can't do that at Busch Stadium here in St. Louis.
Walmart.
You know, I mean, yeah, but like, so you just
Target.
You don't see this stuff, not very often, not comparatively to schools.
Well, I found an interesting take that it was something that I wanted to bring up, because there is a little bit of an impulse that we have as a as a species, so to speak, where most people are innately of themselves moralists. They believe that there is a thing, a tweak, a law, or something that you can impose that will change people's behavior for good, or that there is a portion of it that will actually make life better if they obey this moral reasoning. So advocating for tougher and stricter laws, or more laws to be put on society or individuals, so that they go, you know, that they don't have the impetus to then go out and do these things, where that's even starting from the wrong place, where we're flawed individuals. The person who shut up this school violated many laws. They didn't take into account what the gun laws were. They had a desire to go shoot up a school, and they did so. It's unfortunate that it has to be that blatantly sad, but that's exactly what it is. And we can do things to try to mitigate that in, I would say, wiser ways of combating the evil. But you're not going to get rid of that evil altogether.
But here's the thing: is this is one facet, one complaint that we have talked about on this very show about problems with the public school system, right? Just a few weeks ago, we were talking about this don't say gay bill or whatever in Florida, where they wanted to stop teaching young children about sexuality, particularly homosexuality. You know, we've got all of these other problems, overcrowding in schools. The entire system is failing academically. We keep on dropping compared to the rest of the world. We have mental health issues, the increasing rates of teen suicide. We have all of these problems that can be directed back at the schools. And still it's like, okay, whatever the problem is, it's not the public schools themselves.
Yeah, but Carrie, everybody I talked to, I've never heard anybody tell me that, like, my school is not in the top 20%. Like, my school, I've never heard somebody say my school is terrible.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Every single way that you say everybody's that. Yeah, because every school is special.
Yeah. Well,
they're the top in the state. Oh, they are they?
Yeah. Along with every other school.
Every other school, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
surely have made everything equal. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other grievance that I have is sort of with Christian evangelicals, because, you know, there's a whole host of people out there, Christians, who are like, we're not going to homeschool because homeschooling is this thing that weird people do and lock their kids in and you know, shelter they saw them me and then they went, oh yeah. And you know, I'm not even like, I mean, I am a homeschooling advocate, obviously, because I homeschool, but I'm just as much of a private school advocate. In fact, I'd love to have a great private school that's accessible to me, but I hear Christian evangelicals say, well, we're not going to pull our kids out of school because that's a mission field where our kids can be missionaries. And I'm just like, your kids are not equipped for this. Like you think that they're going to go preach to the gunman or to the transgender teacher that's trying to indoctrinate them, or to the suicidal kid who doesn't know what to do because they can't handle the pressure from their teachers or their parents. Like, seriously, you think this is a mission field and that's how you're going to solve the problem? That's why you're going to keep your kids in these failing situations? Frustrates me.
It is a mission field. It's just not appropriate to send your kids into.
Fair enough.
Very,
yeah.
very good way to say that. Yeah. And that's something that has been said for at least, that's 30, 40 years.
I've been alive.
Yeah, when I was a kid in school, that's what what was popular about it. It's like, treat it as your mission field. Well, I mean, if we're going to say that that's the case, then the church needs to take a good hard look at that mission field and say, we're not winning that realm.
We're not winning it, guys.
Yeah, good luck with that. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. And so you get, a lot of puzzling responses to this, of course. We're beginning to see, the kind of the ramp up in the public campaign in the tradition of the, Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. We're already seeing the ramp up. We've seen Biden has blamed the gun lobby already. Like, the gun lobby is responsible for this young 18-year-old Salvador Ramos is his name, the shooter. I think so. Salvador Ramos it's not his fault. He pulled triggers, he got the weapons, he went there, and it's not his fault. No, it's the gun lobby. Like, it's just, come on, people. People 3,000 miles away. It's baffling. And that doesn't mean like the gun lobby is full of great people who are all my good friends and so on and so on. No, I'm not saying that at all. That's
who are you funded
stupid
by, Norm?
Yeah. And now a word from our sponsor, the NRA. No, they're not. They're not.
But for my check.
Yeah, they don't like me already, I'm pretty sure. No,
yeah, right.
That's not really the point. Is that these are foils for what they want. Right. It's not. It has nothing to do with. My objection to it has nothing to do with the people that are involved in gun lobbies or whatnot. It's about the way in which the state is trying to abscond away with power over people. And of course, there's also the calls again. We've assault weapon bans, various types of mental health checks, and blah blah blah. And there's plethoras of evidence out there to suggest these are not going to be good, but yet we're going to have to fight that battle yet again, over and over, because we have to. It does suck, and this is the conservative doesn't seem to get this a lot of the time. And like, your problem with your limited government stance, and why you need to go even more limited, is that if you allow for this sort of thing, like, you have to fight that every single time and win, and win. They just have to keep pushing for more control, and they just have to win once.
Yep.
Each time. Like, it's good grief. And so this is why you have to limit your government as hard as you possibly can to zero,
Yeah, exactly.
in as many ways possible, because you have to disallow them to do this sort of stuff, because this is not going to work. It would be less let's say for a second that Texas decided that they were going to start cracking down on gun stuff more than, but if it that affects Texas, not as much me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so decentralization even works in this respect. It would affect, a limited group of people for a limited amount of time, potentially, until they see, this is not working. They could potentially flip it, whatever. But when the federal government gets involved, it ratchets up, and it affects everybody in different ways. My gosh, where did we get the idea that this was equality? Is that what it needs to be? Is that how this works? No, that's not the form of equality that we're looking for.
Yeah.
But goodness gracious, people. I
just want to throw in there, Beto O'Rourke also interrupted a press conference by the governor, which I thought was like, you're not really helping yourself out here, bud. And he made himself just look like an absolute clown. And it was one of those things that I just thought, the only thing that we are,
it makes it look like a clown to you.
Right. I'm sure the left is like, The left is
Well, that's
fawning
true.
all over it.
Yeah,
They're like,
he's
look
gonna-
at him. He's standing up to the great
Yeah.
Governor Abbott.
Yeah,
But I will say this.
he did such a brave thing.
Yes.
But I will say that, we're getting more and more to the point where the only thing that we have to hope in is the incompetence of public officials. And that's a scary place to be sometimes.
That is true. Well, speaking of incompetent public officials,
exactly.
and there's all sorts of ways we could segue into this next topic. Matthew, please say
You're going to
something
give that
funny.
responsibility to me?
I want it. You wrote it.
Oh man.
What's our transition here?
Well, do you want me to go through the transition that I'm more than happy to give that to you here.
Let's
because
go super meta for a second. Sometimes we actually plan, and
yeah, exactly.
And this time we kind of overplanned.
So just so you know, I heard Biden's FDA shut down a major formula manufacturer.
Oh yes, really?
How dare he?
Oh.
In the long-standing tradition of cartoon supervillains, Biden has literally taken food out of infants' mouths. You've heard the old saying, like taking life-giving nutrients from a baby. Oh, no, wait. The supervillains are actually kinder by taking away highly fattening candy instead.
Right.
So there you have it, folks. Our president is worse than Snidely Whiplash, the deadly do-right villain. Thank you very much.
He'll be here all week, folks.
I'll be here all
week. If you see a headline, you heard it here first.
Biden Snidely Whiplash equals. Yeah.
There you go. Well, of course, this refers to the almost humorous of happenings going on these days with regards to the baby formula shortage. But there's some weird economics and that goes on behind the scenes here. I think Carrie has some of the insight on that. And so if you haven't heard this yet, hey, this is some pretty cool stuff. Check it out.
Yeah. So you guys should go check out an article that John Miltmore from, I believe it was originally published with Foundation for Economic Education, but the American Institute for Economic Research also picked it up. And the article is called "How Government Created the Baby Formula Shortage." And
surprise.
It doesn't really roll off the tongue, does
Actually,
it? Baby formula shortage.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and they even miss an interesting nuance, which I'll get to in a minute. But the short story is basically in late April, people started posting pictures of the empty shelves for baby formula in particular. I mean, people have been posting food shortage pictures for quite a while. Then they figured out, baby formula is not on those shelves. And so they started posting, and it eventually caught the attention of the White House. And they were like, oh, well, this is a problem.
We had nothing to do with this.
Yeah. Well, it turns out that they do have something to do with this.
What?
Number one,
color me shocked.
There was a recall for a potential bacterial outbreak from a formula plant in Michigan, and then the FDA decided to keep them shut down in order to do some sort of inspection. And this is
not atypical, by the way. That's like that does happen.
No.
Yeah. So the problem is that, and he, Miltmore points this out. It's one of the baby formula is one of the most tightly regulated food products in our industry. And you would think, this is for the safety of the babies, right? And to some degree, I can understand that, because one bit of the story that Miltmore didn't pick up on was the fact that in 2019, 95% of baby formula was found to have heavy metals in the formula. Matthew. So at any rate, of course, they're calling this a public health crisis, which means we need the government to get involved. Which is just absolutely outrageous because the government has been involved. The government allowed the standards that allowed the heavy metal toxins into the formula to begin with, and now they're over-regulating and overcompensating in the name of saving the children. One thing that I really want to point out, and I get this question a lot from pro-lifers, and really, I mean, even you guys have asked me this question about, life affirming options for mothers and how we can discourage the use of abortion and things like that. This is one of those life affirming options that the government keeps screwing up.
Yeah.
Not only have they regulated this in such a way that baby formula is either not safe or not available, but it's also crazy expensive. And on top of this, one of the things that Miltmore pointed out was that there are many social media groups where moms are going through and they're actually able to obtain illegally baby formula from Europe, and they're going through and evaluating the ingredients in that baby formula to make sure it's safe. These are mothers. These are mothers who are doing this.
It's almost like you could have people not employed by the government testing products to make sure they're safe.
Yes. And by the way, this
I
thing
barely believe it.
This thing with the formula has actually been going on for a couple of decades now. I remember these debates happening when my kids were breastfeeding and bottle feeding. So this has been going on for a while as far as finding healthy, making sure that these things are healthy and safe. It's moms who are doing that work.
Yeah.
It's not the FDA. They're making it harder and they're making it more expensive.
Yeah.
So
who knew that the
rate,
government would fail at testing?
Well, that's the argument, right? We need the government to keep us safe, to consumer protection, and to make sure that what we're giving our children is safe to eat. Never mind all the garbage that you find in cereals and colored artificial drinks and things of that nature.
You leave Fruity Pebbles alone.
But that's the argument, right? Is we need to keep our kids safe, and they're not keeping them safe, and number two, they're making it really expensive. And those are all factors that go into whether a mom's going to keep her baby or not, whether a mom feels like she can actually afford motherhood. So just want to point out, you get the government out of the way, moms are perfectly capable of figuring out if what they're feeding their babies are safe. And because that's what they're doing right now. Oh, and they're willing to use the black market, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of world do we live in where you've got to go buy trunk formula?
Black market.
Right? Black market baby formula, guys.
Who knew? It's like,
I mean, the government really put us in this situation because of all of those regulations basically created a certified monopoly of formula creation. Yep. And so if you pinch that one sector, then you're going to have a whole issue. And frankly, we're only 2 years out from regularly using formula for our kids. Our daughter's turning 4, or she is 4. And I can really sympathize with that because, my wife agonized over breastfeeding and bottle feeding. I mean, mothers do this to themselves so much to the point where I just say, as a guy, it's not working with one, just use the other. But for a mom, it's such a weighted decision that this truly matters. You're not necessarily, there's not just a baby formula shortage. You are taking away life from these children. And it is the only thing that they can sustain on, or at least that's how the mother sees it. And so it just creates anxiety and doubt and problems and issues. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, all because we think the government can save us from ourselves, and they can't.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is the alternative to this, and I sympathize with mothers who struggle over this question of breastfeeding versus formula, because oftentimes that comes up because they're struggling with breastfeeding, which is stressing them out, and that's making it even more difficult to breastfeed. But at any rate, there are alternatives out there like breast milk banks where women will donate their breast milk so that babies can continue to drink breast milk, but that's also heavily regulated.
Right.
It's heavily regulated in such a way that they throw out a majority of that milk and it's perfectly good, or they go and pasteurize it and they don't need to pasteurize it.
What?
Yes, they
What?
pasteurize breast milk. It's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd.
So I know actually way too much about pasteurization than it should be reasonably understood by any human being, and I'm not going to get into that. But
because you never know, your mother might have E. coli.
Right.
So
Doug and I were with Doug. We recorded a podcast last night, and he gave me this. He gave me a great compliment when he said that, like, you have this uncanny ability to speak on a wide variety of things, and intelligently. And then something like this comes up, and it's just like, yeah, you have no idea how much I know about like microwave pasteurization. And things like that. You have no idea. Oh, Lordy mercy. Oh my gosh. Well, I think it is. A couple final points. Well, maybe you guys have additional points, but something I wanted to throw out here because Matthew, you alluded to this in the issue of the FDA regulation, and I think one unappreciated point is very simply that if you think that drugs are expensive, in part because of the FDA and their involvement in the approval and testing and all that process there, keep in mind that this is the same freaking thing that happens here.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a slightly different, pathway, but it's fundamentally of the same ilk.
yeah.
And so you want to know, like, why is it so expensive to do this? Well, this is it. It's just like buying drugs. Okay, there you go. So that is wild and crazy and stupid.
We should write a book or do a documentary about baby formula, drugs, and corn syrup. And just go through all the FDA woes.
Well, actually, that reminds me. I mean, a good resource. Now, this is slightly tangential to baby formula itself, but there is a book that is fairly recent. I think it was 2018, either 2017 or 2018, written by a very good friend of ours of this show, of LCI in general, Dr. Mary Ruart. A book about the FDA and the regulations of I think it was the 61 regulations, and from 1961 regulations of the FDA. I may be getting that year wrong. I'm just having to remember that right now. Anyway, the book is called Death by Regulation. And I think the subtitle is something like how the FDA is robbing us of the golden age of health. Because if we're really honest with ourselves, we do have one of the most remarkable, like, innovative health systems and stuff that's available to us that's ever existed, period. Like there's literally no argument there. Okay. Yep. And yet it is problematically expensive because of interventionism. Right. So if you, it's,
and also in fact, international interventionism, but I'll get to that later.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, like it's now like quite data driven. You can kind of determine this. You can kind of figure out how many deaths that were preventable that the FDA has essentially been responsible for by delaying or canceling drugs that would have been life providing for people. And there are stories in that book that'll blow you away about things like drugs for liver treatment and whatnot. The fact that as I've stated before, and we talked, Mary and I had a conversation a few weeks ago that is on the main LCI podcast about, and we brought this up about, even with regards to COVID, like, why do we not have effective antivirals and antimicrobials and whatnot? Well, it's because antibiotic development is extremely not profitable due to the way in which stuff is regulated. And you can trace this out. It's all there. And she's done a great job in that. So I'm going to quit advertising for the book. It's not really intentional, but it is a great book. Highly recommend it. Mary's awesome.
The flip side of that, though, is that things like the opioid crisis is completely manufactured by the FDA, because all of those are all drugs that are FDA approved. I mean, you've got on the one hand, people who have died because they haven't been able to take medications that have been unapproved, but you've also had a ton of people die because of medications they did approve. And all of it has to do with politics and that sort of nonsense.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the case in point there is stuff like the thalidomide crisis of years ago. You know, the drug that was FDA approved, but also caused a massive amount of birth defects because because of the way in which it was the thalidomide being the drug, if you're unaware, was meant to prescribe for abating
infants,
morning
right?
sickness.
Yeah, morning sickness.
Yeah. So but it was a bad idea.
Oh, it was for morning sickness, and it affected the infant. Yes.
Yeah.
So
people want to say, well, without the FDA, who would do this? And there are plenty of people who are skilled and educated enough to offer consumer protection that's actually effective.
And they might respond to pressures outside of political ones that actually might do people good in the end.
Yeah.
So
in the end.
Yeah.
Well, they're subject to market forces.
Yes.
What do you know? Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So any final points you guys want to make before we close out here?
Nope.
How long do we have to wait until all of our legs are broken and the government giving us crutches till we say, why don't you stop breaking our legs?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Can we just have secession now? I mean, can we just peacefully break up?
I want it to be
point?
over. Like
I'm tired of this.
Please, Lord, come.
Yeah. Mercy.
Say that
me.
a good 20 times a day.
I do need to thank Carrie for all that information. Thank you very much for staying abreast of it all.
There it is.
There it is, folks.
There it is, folks. That's it.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. We'll be here all week.